Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan Dornbush, and I am joined by IGN's own Zach Ryan.
What's up, Jonathan? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. We're here, of course, because we are going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is not a remake of the full original game, but rather the remake of the opening Midgar portion of the original Final Fantasy VII.
That's right.
So I think we want to talk a little bit about how the structure of this game works, if it feels like what they added was too much filler, because this is a 30, 40-hour RPG that you can play for a couple dozen more hours if you're trying to do everything. But you're someone who has played the original Final Fantasy VII. I've never played it beyond the first hour or so. Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I played it a lot when I was a kid. You know, there was a period of my life, middle school, where like we would just play it. My friends and I would just play it over and over and over again. I completed that game several times.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about how you feel this as meant to be a full game that you can buy for full price, how it feels in terms of a proper adventure. Did you enjoy the length of this game? Did you enjoy the story flow? How did it feel for you?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about this on our spoiler cast recently, but I think I was very skeptical coming into Final Fantasy VII Remake because, to me, the idea of an episodic adventure was not super appealing to me when you're talking about like a full-length JRPG. And then when we actually learned that they were going to drill down into Midgar and it would be like a full-length game based solely around Midgar, to me, in my mind, it was like, well, that's not enough content to make a 30 or 40-hour RPG. But having played the game, having finished it, I can honestly say like they did such a fantastic job of fleshing that world out and making really smart choices for characters and just the way that you play through the different slums and the Shinra building and all these different things that kind of add up to make it feel like an all-encompassing experience. I don't really feel like you have that kind of part one feeling until the very end of this game. We talked about the idea that calling it Final Fantasy Remake was a little bit of Final Fantasy VII Remake was a little bit of like false advertising. I definitely think that it should have gotten a part one subtitle, but I don't feel like people will feel like this is lacking until you reach this. No spoilers, but the ending is a bit of a cliffhanger. So
yeah, it's definitely designed to be like, wait, there's more, but we don't have it for you yet. Right. I did want to start with, in terms of what they've added on the story side, again, without spoiling anything here, we do have the spoiler cast for that. The remake really drills in on giving you a lot more, to me at least it seems, character moments, filling in the backstories more of characters. How did you like all of that as someone who's experienced these characters before?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Final Fantasy VII is a very important game. In hindsight, I don't think it's a very great game. I think the translation, the localization is like kind of historically pretty bad. The game is kind of a slog in 2020. But the thing that it is most known for is its characters and its story. And I think that they've done such an awesome job of building those characters into like actual characters with real depth and emotional arcs. And even in this game that only takes place over the first 5 hours, you see characters like Cloud and Barrett change so much that I think that it's a really cool new approach to this story.
Yeah, there's really great development that I think all the main characters, Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, all of them really go through these big changes throughout the game and kind of become the people I'm excited to see in a sequel. I also wanted to point out, because I know they have a much smaller role, but Wedge, Biggs, and Jesse all get fleshed out a lot more here. How was that for you as someone who knows them? Because they're a pretty small part of the original game, right?
Yeah, they have, a handful of lines and then they're kind of, yeah, I mean, they're awesome characters. Each of them has their own motivations and backstory in this game that really appealed to me. And I also thought it was very nice that you could do a tandem parachute with Wedge at one point. That was very sweet.
Yeah, it's a really heartwarming moment.
That's right.
With Breaking Bad actors involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wanted to jump then into the act of actually playing it, because there is a bit of a different flow here with Final Fantasy VII Remake. So you are essentially progressing throughout Midgar. You'll go to different power reactors and then into different segments of Midgar's slums. How did you like the progression of it? Because the game would occasionally stop the story to let you explore open world-ish segments.
Yeah, so the game is broken up into chapters, kind of like Final Fantasy 15, but the interesting thing that it does here, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm sold on it actually, is like in certain chapters, like I've dubbed some of the chapters like side quest chapters, right?
Yeah.
Like chapter 3, I think it's chapter 9, chapter 14. Like there's all these chapters where like they open up the world to allow you to do different side quests, different jobs, things like that, that kind of fill out the experience. I initially was pretty surprised because having played the first of those chapters, I only did a couple of those side quests, assuming that I could come back and finish them later, and then was surprised to realize, like, once I'd finished that chapter, those side quests were gone. And they do a decent enough job of telling you that that's how it works. It just didn't register for me, right? Like, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, but I was surprised when I went to go back and was like, oh, I can't do those side quests. That being said, the next chapter that I got to, that was another one of these side quest chapters, I did everything possible, and the following one, I did everything possible there too. So I really liked the kind of like break and flow to the game, because it is a game that has these like big emotional beats, and like you're kind of stampeding your way through the story. So it is nice to get that breather. I would prefer it to be in the sequels to be a more traditional in the way that it doles out side quests and you can kind of attack them at your own pace. But in this particular instance, because it is so, the story is so driven, it was nice to kind of have it, time out and go find some cats or, fight a weird monster or whatever.
Yeah, I think it does add a needed cadence, because you do need a break from those crazy, epic, or really character-driven important moments. Otherwise, everything is at the same tempo.
Yeah, and they do a really good job of sprinkling like fun character moments into those side quests, so that it's not, it's not a total loss. Like you're not just doing stuff to do it. Like you're still palling around with Aerith through the Sector 5 slums. There's some really interesting stuff there.
Yeah, it's definitely valuable, I think, in the way that it's character-driven stuff. I definitely would say those missions are probably the least interesting missions or gameplay aspects of it. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but the weird pace of this and how it doesn't really introduce this idea of open-world stuff, you get fast travel introduced extremely late in this game.
Yeah, that was one thing that did kind of bum me out, because I feel like so many of the side quests rely on you running from one point on the map until like all the way to the other side, or like, to the very edge of one sector. And when you do start unlocking the different chocobo stops for fast travel late in the game, it's like you realize how convenient that would have been 10 hours ago when you were doing side quests. And so it's like, well, okay, I get that there's an experience and a flow that is dictated here, but yeah, it would have been nice to kind of skip the underground tunnels for the 10th time when I was, playing through those slums. But
absolutely. It feels like a good, rough first draft of how they can hone this in for future segments. And as we wrap up, I do want to sort of get to that. When you finish the game, were you left feeling like this experience as a whole, like it wasn't a thing that was padded with a ton of filler? Excuse me. It wasn't padded with a ton of filler. It wasn't a waste of time. How did you feel about that at the end?
I don't necessarily feel like it's filler. I do agree with you that most of those side quests are not as interesting as the stuff that you do in the main storyline. But there are things like we talked about it on the spoiler cast, but like I definitely feel like there are major pacing issues with this game, despite the fact that I really loved it. I think that the third act is sort of broken in terms of pacing, and the side quest stuff doesn't really do much to help that, because it is another, kind of offshoot there. But no, I don't feel like, in terms of an entire experience, I don't necessarily feel like this game is padded out with filler. There's just a lot of stuff to do there, and whether or not you choose to interact with it is sort of up to the player.
Yeah, they do a really great job, I think, of letting you choose if you want to interact with the side stuff or just continuing to progress in the game and not feel like you're falling too far behind when it comes to playing through all of that. But thank you, Zach, so much for talking to me about FF7. Of course, if you want to hear more about it, we did do a full spoiler cast, which you can check out on IGN.com. And of course, be sure to check out our original Final Fantasy VII Remake review or our guide if you're playing through it right now. But thank you otherwise so much for watching.